Okay.
Dr. Kamachi,
Okay.
am I
Now you
audible?
can. Yes, yes.
Shall I start now?
Okay, sir.
You want to say
No,
something
it is
before
clear.
that?
No, no, no. You can start.
Okay. Okay. Good evening to all present in the today's webinar. At the outset, I would like to thank the president of Tamil Modigal Sangam, Tamil Linguistics Association, Professor Karnagaran, and the secretary of the Tamil Association, Linguistics Association, Professor G. Balasubramaniam, the Vice Chancellor of Tamil University, Tanjavur, and especially with kind regards, I welcome today's speaker, Professor Ramesh Sharma, eminent linguist in India, and I also welcome the organizers of the webinar through the Tamil Modigal Sangam and also the other office bearers, especially the delegates who are present in the webinar. I wholeheartedly welcome them. And I feel it is my pleasant duty to preside over this webinar. And I also feel it my privilege to welcome with a few words about today's speaker, Professor Ramesh Sharmaji. I have not met him personally for a long time, but I know him through Facebook and we interact with him very much through the Facebook. So he is very close to me in the sense. And today he is going to give a lecture on language, cognition, and empowerment. And it is my pleasant duty to introduce today's speaker, Professor Ramesh Sharma, to our august audience. Professor Ramesh Sharma hails from Faridabad in Haryana. Professor did his MA in linguistics from Guru Kshetra University, and he also in linguistics, and he has also got an MA in philosophy from the same university. Later, Professor went to the Deccan College in Pune, and he did his PhD from the University of under the University of Pune, and it is a very good research what he had done on that. And in addition to that, Professor Sarmaji has put up 44 years of teaching, and in which he has served as a professor of linguistics for 25 years. And he has got 16 years of administrative experience also. To start with, I would like to say Professor Sharmaji started his career as lecturer in linguistics at Guru Kshetra University, and he served there from 1976 to 1985. Later, he joined as a reader in linguistics at the Delhi University in 1985 and became the professor in linguistics in Delhi University in 1995 and served there till his retirement. In between, that is from 2007 to 2008, and again from 2012 to 2014, he worked as a professor at the Hankook University of Foreign Studies in South Korea. Here he taught in the Department of Indian Studies, Hindi, and International Studies. And he has not only doing his regular duty as a professor of linguistics, but he has the honor of a visiting professor in many universities in India. For example, he was served as a visiting professor in Manipur University in 1988, in Annam University in 1999 and 2006, and in Banaras Hindu University in 2010, and in other universities like Jawaharlal University Delhi, Rohtak University, Aligarh Muslim University Agra, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel University in Gujarat, Bhopal University, Vikram University in Ujjain, and Kashmir University, and also Punjab University in Patiala, Central Hindi University in Nagpur. This tells us his academic potentiality, which is very much appreciated by all of the fellow linguists in India and abroad. And Professor Sharmaji is specialized in psycholinguistics, neurolinguistics, sociolinguistics, phonetics, philosophy of language, teaching Hindi as a foreign language to the non-Hindi learners. And he has put up a teaching experience of 44 years at MA and MPhil level. He is handling the subjects like general linguistics, phonetics and phonology, and history of linguistics, psycholinguistics, neurolinguistics, applied linguistics, computer linguistics, etc. And Professor Sharma has also offered courses in the departments of Germanic, Romance languages, and the Department of Hindi and English in Delhi University. And Professor Sharma has guided nearly 45 doctoral candidates so far, and 42 MPhil scholars. It is a very great achievement in his linguistics career. And he has published 3 books, with one of them in press. The first 2 books are titled as Communicative Behavior of Mentally Retarded, that is published in 1987. And the other one is the Indian Theory of Knowledge and Language in 1995. And the book under press is Brain Evaluation and Language. So, sorry, Brain Evolution and Language. And he has published more than 100 research articles in national and international journals. Both are impacted or the peer-reviewed journals. Regarding his administrative capacity, in Kurukshetra University, he was the coordinator of cultural activities and also served as a warden also. In Delhi University, he has served as the HOD of Linguistics Department, coordinator of UGC SAP program, dean examination, and chairman of BRSH, and the chairman of University Press and Publications. And he also the coordinator and the director for programs related to foreign studies students in the university. And he served as the editor of the Linguistic Society of India. And regarding his research contribution, I can say that Professor Sharma has undertaken several minor and major projects with the financial assistance from the UGC. In 2015, he completed a significant project, pre-adaptation for the evolution of languages. Then an ICSSR project on psycholinguistic investigation in aging. And he has associated with NCERT and SCERT also. He is serving as a member of several academic bodies in university in all over Tamil Nadu, all over India. And he is a member of Linguistics Society of India and Dravidian Linguistic Association and other eminent academic bodies in India. And these things tells us what an eminent linguist Professor Ramesh Sharma is. And we are in fact very happy to have him today to talk on his very favorite subject. And presently, Dr. Ashish Sharma is in JC Bose University of Science and Technology since August 2019 in the Department of English. And we are really happy, sir, that we have the occasion and the pleasant time to have you amidst us today. And maybe I think you are the first person for a non-Tamil from North India to take part in the webinar being organized by the Tamil Linguistics Association. So we feel it a great honor to have you today, sir. So with this, I once again thank today's guest speaker, Professor Ramesh Sharma ji, and also the president, the secretary, and other members of the Tamil Linguistics Association for having given the honor of presiding over this function. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Sir. Now, Professor Kamachi.
Sir,
yeah, yes.
Please unmute, sir.
Yeah,
Sharma,
yes.
Sir.
Okay.
Sharma, sir. Okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah. It is. It is audible.
Thank you, Professor Ravi Shankar. It's a great honor for me,
yes, sir,
to have this opportunity to share my ideas to such an august body. I am in particular grateful to Professor Ravi Shankar, Professor Karunakaran, Professor Balasubramanian, Professor Ram Murthy, and other honorable members. Vanakkam. It's a rare privilege to speak to linguists who are associated with one of the richest and the oldest languages of the world. And to speak on a topic like language cognition and empowerment is just opening up a big horizon. Indeed, it is such a vast, panoramic subject that it may not be possible to give a broader view of cognitive science or cognitive language and cognition. I have therefore chosen to just speak 10 major points in relation to language, cognition, and development. I suppose I am audible to each member. Am I reaching you?
Yes, sir, audible.
Okay.
You can
Wonderful.
proceed, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
No problem.
So, the first point I wish to bring home is that interestingly, among the major evolutionary developments, the developments which have happened to humankind and which sets the human beings apart from rest of the animals are in particular the evolution of brain, evolution of mind, evolution of cognition, evolution of bipedal locomotion. And these four major evolutionary developments, four major biological developments have further contributed to the emergence of language. So put together, these five great evolutionary developments, again I repeat, brain, mind, cognition, bipedal locomotion, that is the capacity to walk on 2 feet and thus spare the hands to do innovations in technology, and along with the changes which took place in human biology, great transformations which took place owing to the evolutionary developments, finally we get language. Therefore, we wish to address how language and cognition are related and how such an important issue of language and cognition could be a tool of human empowerment. So the first point is that both language and cognition are among the major developments and they have evolved hand in hand, contributing and strengthening each other. So this is the first point. The second point I wish to highlight is the nature of language in relation to the cognition. Language, of course, can be viewed as a universal human faculty, multifaceted system as it is, but it can also be viewed, interestingly, as an abstract system and also as a mental phenomenon. But when we say that language can be viewed as a mental phenomenon, we are not ignoring the dimension of language as a social phenomenon. Now, what we wish to bring home here is that as a mental phenomenon, as something being inherent in human mind, how language is related to cognition. So the third point, in addition to this, I would also like to explain that what does language, how does language come into picture? How does language contribute to the growth and development of human cognition? Now, first of all, it should be remembered that language gives insight into the nature of human mind, society, culture, and civilization, primarily because both language and cognition interplay. They interact with each other, but they interact in such a manner that language can be considered as a separate entity in itself. Cognition can also be considered as a separate entity itself. And because of the play, we find a rich area where they are interacting, where they have an interesting interface. And that is more exciting for a person like us, you know, to focus on. Now, this becomes obvious also from the fact that if we look at the question of acquisition of language is different from acquisition of cognition. Interestingly, if I ask you to focus on how long does it take after all for a human child to acquire basic linguistic competence to be proficient in that language. Now, you would agree with me that it may be somewhere around 5 years or little more than that. But around 5 to 6 years, a human child becomes a competent speaker of the language and is able to express the feelings, the emotions, and also can use language as a tool to further acquire human cognition. But if we wish to address the question, after all, how long does it take for human beings to acquire knowledge, to acquire cognition? Then it becomes such a silly question that it would be difficult for us to respond to, because we cannot define in terms of a division in the lifespan that we have finished acquisition of human cognition. In fact, acquisition of human cognition continues in the full span of lifetime. Therefore, there are some divisions, some differences in these two compartments of the knowledge of language and the knowledge, the cognition, the language and the cognition. Whereas a linguist is more concerned with the structure and the functioning of human language, a cognitive scientist would be more interested in the study of the cognition. And there would be a host of other disciplines which would have seminal interest in both and in their interfaces. But this is true that we need to find about the reflections between these points. Third point I wish to bring home is by raising a question, how does human mind, this is a very important question for a number of sciences today to consider. After all, we have to look at how does human mind compute and structure the world and the reality. How does human mind compute the world, and how the reality of the world or the reality in relation to the world is computed and structured, how it is broken. Because these issues would reflect upon when we look at the nature of human language. Now, why we consider this question? Because for us, the structure of human experience is very interesting. Structure of human experience for a cognitive scientist is interesting because it is based on, it is contingent on two different things. One is the conceptual domain and second is the linguistic domain or the language domain. Both conceptual system and the linguistic system contribute to the nature of human experience. Therefore, the relationship is far deeper and it is worth looking at from a variety of points to consider how language and cognition are interrelated. Now, I would like to also bring in here the debate which has been going on for centuries in philosophy, the question of difference and similarity, or the question of difference and relationship between human brain and human mind. In fact, the study of mind began later as an offshoot of human brain. But if you look into philosophy, you find the study of mind is much older. But we have to consider that how brain, mind, and cognition. I pointed out that these three have evolved in course of evolution. But these three, brain, mind, and cognition, they go hand in hand. You cannot put them in exclusive compartments. In fact, brain is brain because of the mind, mind is mind because of the brain, and language is language because of brain and mind. We cannot view these three in isolation from each other. So, where do we reach? We reach a point where language, because we as students of linguistics are concerned primarily with the language. So language enables us to understand human mind. That has to be the paradigm. That has to be the target, that we study language to study human mind, the functioning of mind. Now, you may say that why should we look at it, and what is the nature of mind? Now, when we look at the question of mind, it's a very complex entity, but primarily we can look from three angles. The three different realizations of human mind are: one, perception, which contributes to mind and is also the reality of the mind. Second is the memory. Now, how the human beings have learned to store the information and then recall them as and when they need. This becomes very important. So memory is the second thing, and third dimension of the human mind is the consciousness. This is also very important to consider, that we will have to look into the complex questions, particularly from philosophical, cognitive, and the psychological point of view. What is consciousness, and how language is an instrument, or how language can be considered in relation to consciousness. But interestingly, I would like to quote here one important cognitive scientist who has mentioned that language has a different kind of relationship with the human mind. Human mind having realizations and relations with perception, memory, and the consciousness. But language having a different kind of relationship. It's a two-way relationship with the human mind. It's reciprocal. Reciprocal in the sense that language contributes to mind and mind also contributes to language. Now, when you look at the questions of mood, modality, expressions of emotions in language, then you are looking at how mind is contributing to language. But when you look at how we divide the realization of the knowledge of the things in the world into animate as opposed to inanimate, male as opposed to female, or gender system, number system, and so on and so forth, or division of time into certain ways such as tense or aspect, and so forth, then we are looking at how language is contributing to mind. So it's not just the mind which is contributing to language. So it's a reciprocal relationship between language and mind. This is one kind of relationship. And third kind of relationship is recursive. Recursive in the sense that they are one after another. So that relationship is also very important. But the point here is that mind and language are so important that both emerge as important tools of human cognition. The fourth issue which I wish to highlight is that study of mind and language in particular has to deal with processes, all the processes which are concerned with language processing in human mind. How is language handled in human mind? How is language represented in human mind? How is language computed in human mind? For example, very simple thing is that if we look at the various levels of traditional language analysis, like the phonological, the morphological, then the lexical, then the syntactic, and then the discourse. We also wish to find out or wish to explore whether human mind also processes them accordingly. If not, or if so, then how various kinds of steps are involved in relation to the processing of human language in the human mind. Then not only processing in human mind, but also in relation to language acquisition. For example, when language is acquired, what happens? Now, interestingly, I discovered that my granddaughter was always using tum for anyone, because that was, but Hindi has three kinds of pronomen, second person pronominal forms. Tu, tum, aap. Tu is least polite and aap is most polite. So she was always using tu, tum for me as well as for her grandmother, for her father as well as mother. It was today, and today means she has completed 3 years only this month. In July, she completed 3 years. So after 3 years, she has learned, and she has for the first time made use of aap, that is honorific to address to me. So how does this knowledge of using honorific pronominal form is acquired by the child? In other words, when we look at the questions of language acquisition, questions of acquisition of cognition cannot be ignored. We have to look into, for example, whether the children, when they are acquiring the language, how they have learned to conceptualize time, how they have learned to conceptualize what is life, how they have learned to conceptualize the distinction between a living creature and a physical object in order to reach the stage of knowing the difference between animate and inanimate. How they have learned to conceptualize the distinction between various quantities, for example, less and more. There may be a stage when they have still, that they may not have acquired quantifiers, and they may be using the distinction of less and more in relation to that. So this is the fourth important point which I wish to bring in relation to language and cognition. The fifth point I want to make is that language and cognition both relate to empowerment. Human societies have remained divided for a variety of reasons, or sought as such by the vested interest that they should be divided. For centuries, thousands of years, in many of the countries, not just in India, but many other countries also, certain people have been exploited by other people. As a result, there have been various kinds of segregations and divisions. And as such, even if many sections of the society speak the same language, some sections of the society became literate earlier, others did not become literate earlier. What is the role of literacy there? Literacy is not just a means of representing the spoken language in the written form. Literacy opens a window of knowledge, window of information. Therefore, when literacy is reached, and with literacy, what is happening? It's a technological nuance. It's a technological development, because spoken representation does not require any technology, whereas writing requires an instrument, it requires a mode, it requires a means where something can be written on. Therefore, it's a technology driven activity. So naturally we can understand that since technology was also a means of deprivation, technology was also a means of segregating certain sections of the society, one can understand why certain sections remained lagging behind in literacy and others acquired the literacy earlier. However, I would like to point out one point later on, that those sections of the society which became literate later, much later in comparison to other sections of the society, they are not lagging behind in their conceptualization of the reality. They are no less than anyone. In fact, they are far more richer in their tools of cognizing the world, cognizing the experience. But language can be a means of empowerment. Therefore, language is a means of cognition, and as such, when it is used as a tool of empowerment, it can contribute immensely for the growth and development of the humankind. I would like to elaborate on this issue slightly later when I discuss another point. The sixth issue I want to discuss is in relation arising out of this. Now, cognitive scientists often talk today a term. I am avoiding all technical terms because I believe that I am talking to a larger audience. Therefore, I am deliberately avoiding the usage of the technical terms. But there is one technical term I cannot avoid, and that is the term called cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve now is a term so frequently used by the cognitive scientists, particularly in the applied cognitive science. This term has emerged in relation to the studies by neuroscientists, neuropsychiatrists in particular, dealing with the problem of Alzheimer's disease. Now, when brain cells start declining in the human brain, then some of the cognitive functions get impaired. And one of the cognitive functions impaired is memory. Another is processing of language in the human mind. And they have by doing by doing number of comprehensive studies, they have pointed out that those people who had to deal with more of cognitive functions, who had more dependencies on cognitive functions in their earlier life, they can have better rate of recovery later on. The question is why? And they argue that these people, such people who have been actively engaged in cognitive processing, they acquire enormous cognitive resources, enormous cognitive knowledge, and how to use that knowledge they have always been dealing. Therefore, what they do, they keep a stock, they keep a warehouse of the information, they keep a warehouse of the cognitive functions, and when the needs arise at a later time because of the decline of the nervous system, then such reserve comes handy. It comes helpful to them, and this has resulted in what is known as cognitive reserve hypothesis. But I would like to draw further from this. Recently, some reports have appeared even in Industrial Psychiatry Journal of India by a number of scholars from Armed Force Medical College, some teachers working there on a project, and they have also reported, which supplements the notion of the cognitive reserve. Now, if we apply this concept in a wider domain, then we come to find out the societies as a whole also share a number of cognitive functions. And therefore, societies also have some collective cognitive responses because they have collective cognitive shared system. They have collective cognitive reservoir, collective cognitive reservoir of the knowledge. Therefore, societies may respond to, and this becomes clear particularly during the situations of emergencies, during certain pandemic situations, during certain catastrophic situations, during the moments of crisis when a particular society feels endangered vis-a-vis their survival, vis-a-vis their the need of coping with certain emergent situations. So in that situation, society as a whole, the community as a whole, a language community as a whole respond to particular situation, thus reflecting in a definite manner. Therefore, the idea we can draw from the notion of the cognitive reserve hypothesis is much wider, because we have to look at, when we study language, when we study how a community is responding to, for example, in the current pandemic situation, we have not focused, linguists have not focused on such issues. But linguists must also focus on such issues, not only in relation to the language, but how language communities have responded to certain issues, in particular coining a particular kind of terminology, coining particular kind of expressions, conceptualizing new things in newer perspectives, and so on and so forth. You know, how even an uneducated person, for example, is well versed with many of the terms which are used. For example, you ask anyone, everyone knows what is the meaning of quarantine, what is the meaning of sanitization, and so on. And many, the migrant labor term, You know, even an uneducated migrant labor says that I am migrant, you know, I'm going from this place to my native place and so on and so forth. So this is a very interesting thread one has to examine in relation to language and cognition, and also how they have, you know, come to realize their empowerment, or how they can be further empowered, what pedagogical implications can be looked at from this point of view. Point number 6 is the cognitive resources and the cognitive wealth. Now, when I say as a linguist, now if you look at the vocabulary, the lexicon, lexicon is a multi-layered storage or storehouse, powerhouse of huge stock of categories. It is very difficult to point out for anyone. You write the best possible dictionary for Tamil, even then it may not be possible to exhaust all lexical items which are used in Tamil. Best possible dictionary for English is not able to bring under its ambit the entire store of information pertaining to the lexical categories, because every now and then we find that there is something more which is remaining. Now, just as a lexicon can be visualized as a storehouse, similarly the thought processes, the cognitive processes, the cognitive functions, all issues pertaining to cognitive development which can be conceptualized and categorized can also be visualized as a storehouse of cognition. Therefore, I say cognitive wealth. Just as we go on acquiring wealth, extending wealth, putting in deposits in the bank and using as and when we need, similarly, the human beings also acquire their cognition, put them in the deposit somewhere, and use them as and when the needs arise. But this notion of cognitive wealth can have wider implications in relation to the study of language, because language and cognition, I have already pointed out, have not only reciprocal relationship with the mind, but they also have a recursive relation with the mind. Point number 7, I wish to highlight this idea which I am drawing from the previous points about the cognitive reserve. Really, we need to learn from the interface with the cognitive scientists, and cognitive scientists have to learn with their interface with linguists to apply this. And there can be not only the implications in the study of health, study of other such issues, but there can be implications in relation to the education, in relation to planning of education, and in relation to various other pedagogical developments. So notion of cognitive reserve, cognitive wealth, and cognitive domain is very exciting, and one has to look at from this point of view. Now, I would also like to consider a slight digression here to propose a very interesting term, that is the notion of cognitive health. Notion of cognitive health means when the cognitive system is not in order, we can say when we want to look at how healthy is a person in cognitive processing. If something is wrong, then we wish to look at whether it is memory, whether it is recalling some information, whether it is using the language, forgetting the names, and so on and so forth. But we can talk of cognitive health. We can similarly talk of linguistic health also. Look here, I am not talking about the health of the language of the community. I am talking the language, the health of the language in relation to thought. So how is a language having a position to respond to particular situations? Maybe new technological nuances have been made. New scientific developments have taken place, and there are no existing paraphernalia in human language. There are no lexical items available, no fragile constructions available to be able to cope with expressing certain cognitive processes, certain processes which have arisen because of the scientific developments. Therefore, we will have to have a relook at the terminological development or the planning, and then we are in a position to do that. Now, this was the discussion in relation to 7 point. Point number 8, I would like to mention that there are 3 important issues concerning cognition. The 3 important aspects of cognition. One is the basic capacities of cognition. Second is the behavioral strategies employed in cognition. And third is the epistemological structures of cognition. Now, for a linguist, sitting at the fence and looking at the cognition, towards a cognitive scientist, it becomes necessary to focus how language is becoming a tool of these 3 aspects of cognition. How is language used in basic capacities, cognitive capacities? We can also reverse this question and look at how basic capacities, basic cognitive capacities help in the design of language, in the structure of the language. The second issue, the behavioral strategies. What are the behavioral strategies employed in cognition? We also have to look at what are the relations existing between the language and the behavioral strategies. And third is the epistemological structures. Epistemological structures means how thought is divided, how thought is structured. And there you can look at the far deeper questions in relation to the language, how language and thought are related. 9th point, because I have less time at my disposal, 9th point is how language can be used, because we can draw a conclusion from hitherto discussions that language certainly emerges as a powerful tool of empowerment. And therefore, it is for the planners. I'll just take 2 minutes and end the story. For language can be a powerful means of empowerment, and language communities that need to be focused on, we have to look at. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nanri, it is open for discussion, for questions and any clarifications. Any questions? I would be happy to.
Hello.
Yeah.
Dr. Sharma ji.
Yeah.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Karunakaran
Yes,
here.
sir.
I'm really very happy that to listen to your lecture
Thank
with
you.
reference to cognition, empowerment, development of languages, etc.
Yeah.
Thank you. At the same time, I have one or two, not questions, but the role of, you are mentioning about cognitive wealth, right? And its
Cognitive.
significance and cognitive wealth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and its significance.
Yeah.
Right. Human beings need to develop their thinking process, okay? Even from the school days, right? Even
That's
from
right.
the childhood, you need to develop. There are children who are not that good in their thinking process. So we try to induce, we try to give them how to analyze, how to think further and make use of language, ask your questions, doubts, clear it, and so on. Right. In
Yeah.
the thinking process, we make use of language definitely even before you utter, right? You think.
Yeah.
Within yourself, right? Language, some structure you have in mind, children have in mind, and try to relate with some kind of meaning which they want to express, right?
Yeah.
That's probably, you know, some children do better and some children are not that good, poor in their thinking process. You know, they have a language, we teach them a language, they have a home language or some other language, at least two languages they have, right? So in this way they have the control to a certain extent, if not to a powerful way. They can express, they can internalize, and so on. Right. My not question, comment is how to develop this thinking process using some kind of cognitive wealth we have already gathered, right? For our, we make use of this kind of wealth for our language teaching, for planning, for developing, for writing, yeah, textbooks or in classroom we use it. So, are there any good research that have been undertaken for this development of thinking process in order to help the children from their school days onwards to develop using whatever cognitive wealth they have? We all have cognitive wealth to a certain extent, maybe to a greater extent, but we should bring it from the lower level or from the primary level onwards. Then the child, when it grows, when it reaches the adulthood, definitely that child, those children will have the language empowerment, will achieve competence as well as to do better. Performance also would be, if not great, they can do better, right? In their communication, both
You are,
written, yeah.
you are,
Can you say something on
yeah, yeah.
that to
You are,
highlight? Yeah.
your question is very exciting and very rich question. I would like to point out that recently in many cognitive scientists have started looking at these fundamental necessities, and educationists have also realized. For example, Professor Ramesh Mishra is sitting over here. He has organized 2 or 3 workshops for uh, teacher trainers to teach them how to make use of such things. But there'll be many more systematic efforts later on, and maybe he may have to add something there.
Okay.
I have been part of some of his ventures there, and facing the direct some similar questions from the teacher trainers. There is a need, and that is the reason why these questions are becoming more and more important every day. See, linguistics is not the linguistics which we saw in
Yeah.
70s and 60s. It's a
Right.
different linguistics. We have grown with the life of linguistics. And it is not just linguistics. Now we are in a world where the divisions have broken down. So computer scientist is sitting with me, linguist is sitting with me, cognitive scientist is sitting with me, a neural scientist is sitting with me, and we are all addressing this question which you have raised from their angles to highlight what best can be done in planning. Definitely, this
Yeah.
can be looked at. Now,
Yeah.
for example, I'll just illustrate a very small thing that when is a child exposed to tables, countings? Child has already learned how to count. Child knows that you give a chocolate to the child and keep another chocolate in the hand. Child says, no, I want this also, because child knows the distinction between one and many. So this distinction between one and many has to be further shaped. Therefore, your question is particularly directed to exploit more the applications of language and cognition for the purpose of school planning. And I admire this is a very important question. Any other question? Do I satisfy you, sir?
Yeah, thank you. It gives yeah, room for further research and also to study more
Yeah,
in depth. Yeah.
I have a question.
yeah, please.
I don't understand the fundamental difference between brain and mind. You made
Oh,
it
yeah, brain and mind.
probably a foolish question.
No. This is a
It is everybody's question, sir.
what you are saying is a question which has been discussed for centuries together. There have been interesting debates, not only in the tradition of philosophies in the West, but also in Indian schools also, Indian schools of philosophy also, this distinction, this debate is going on. But after the turn towards the 20th century, particularly towards the later half of the 19th century, when Paul Broca and some other scholars who were influenced by Paul Broca, they brought insightful understanding about the nature of human brain. That brain is a physical entity existing in the human body. That brain can be visualized as a system, as a kind of machine, and functioning of the brain further is engaged in specific functions, specific activities. Therefore, from this time onward, brain came under focus. But this gave interesting insights into what is the realization of the brain. For example, as I pointed out, my focus was different. I said that brain and mind have both evolved from the beginning. The question that I am, and if I am there, how I am existing in what I speak. This is possible because of mind. I am angry. I am happy. This is all because of mind. If I can look at your face when I am speaking and I realize that you are unhappy with what I am speaking, immediately I modify my language. So I am getting a feedback from you. This is happening because of you are having a mind and I am having a mind. So mind is different. It's a kind of, we can say it's a psychological entity. It's engaged in mental functions. It's engaged in many realizations, but it exists because of the brain. It doesn't exist outside brain. But
Yeah.
there are, if you look at, we can say when brain is dead, consciousness is not there. But consciousness is a realization of the human mind. So this kind of distinction, which was earlier propelled by the debates and discussions among philosophers, has now entered the domain of neural scientists, have entered the domain of cognitive scientists, and linguists also are more concerned with such things. Chomsky, for example, initially for a longer time had focus on brain, and there was no existence of the mind in his discussions of language. It is thanks to the contributions of scholars like Thomas Beaver, thanks to contributions of many others, many of his predecessors, particularly in psychology, who did the work on this, that they suddenly realize that brain alone will not help, mind will have to be realized. Okay, so mind and brain are two different things, but they do have an integral relationship.
Hello, Professor Sharmaji. I'm
Yeah.
Rajshekhar Nair.
Yeah, Nair, please.
So I have a small question.
Yeah, please.
You are telling that your granddaughter till the age of 3 has been using tum, but
Yeah.
later she also was using aap, and
Yeah.
it is a, you said that it is a language acquisition.
Only today I found her using
Yeah,
aap.
that's true. But
Yeah.
you said it is a language acquisition. Can you call
Yeah.
it an acquisition? It's only a
No,
learning.
it's acquisition. It's not learning.
Why?
She constructed the experience,
Huh?
cognitive experience, for a distinction between, or for realizing what is honorific. She was very much affectionate earlier when she was using tum, and she knew that I am some kind of in an honorable affectionate position to her. But constructing the experience, we are bringing the theory of Thomas Beaver and also Piaget, that linguistic realization of the experience is a cognitive construct primarily. We construct the experience, we structure the experience and cognize. And once we have done that, then we require a tool to express. That's why I told that acquisition of linguistic competence is a short time span, maybe 5 years, maybe 6 years. In our country, because of more exposure, unlike the Western societies where child has less exposure because families being highly centric, in our society, it's more open. Barring the days of Corona, when we are subscribing to physical distancing, we believe in openness. And therefore, a child is getting exposure not only in the family, but also outside the family. So language acquisition is faster in typical Asian language communities. So child acquires, first have the cognitive acquisition and then realization in form of language. But what I'm trying to say is that there is no end to acquisition of cognition. Can we say that, okay, now my knowledge is complete? Can anyone say? As a professor, I believe that I am always a student. At the age of 70, I am as much a student as I was when I was in my school, because I was learning, I am now learning. I learn from, even when I give my classes online today to technology students or to MA students, you know, I learn so many things from them. So this learning continues. So acquisition of cognition is a lifetime process and it continues. We cannot say that it has come to an end, but there are many nitty-gritties which are acquired first and come to be realized through language. They may be acquired much later. Therefore, acquisition of semantics may last a longer time, but acquisition of phonology, acquisition of syntax may be reaching a stage of development much earlier. Do I satisfy you, Naya?
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Professor Sharma, Professor
Yeah.
Sharma ji,
Yeah, please.
I think Professor Nair, you want to speak or?
No. He has given the answer.
Okay. Professor, this is Balasubramanian.
Yeah,
The-
please.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah,
It's not a question, but I have loud thinking.
yeah,
With you said about the open-endedness of the lexical stock as
Yeah.
well as the cognitive aspects. But when the cognition is always a much larger
True.
aspect,
True.
and the lexical items are not sufficient enough to express. That's why we are telling you, I don't have words to express what I felt, what I thought. Then in that occasions, the syntax, the some kind of description we are using to manage it. So always the language has several techniques to
Yeah.
express our cognitive nature. Am I right?
You are right. And sometimes, you know, what happens if we look at, for example, we assign new meanings to the existing words. We all are familiar with the term like mouse in computer terminology, term like virus in computer terminology, term like infection in computer terminology, term like a grammatical error in computer terminology, a term like a semantic error in computer terminology. So we assign new meanings to words and expressions to meet with the requirements.
Even default.
Yeah,
Hello,
Thank you, sir.
Professor
Thank you.
Verma,
Thank you.
Professor Sharma.
yeah,
I am Natna Sabhavati speaking.
yeah, Natan Swapti, how are you?
How are fine, sir? How are you?
Fine. How is your
So,
health?
Yeah, it's improved, better improved.
Okay.
I'm very happy to listen to you, but I'm very sorry I have joined late because of due to some other thing. However, a very nice question was asked by Professor Karnakaran. And in this connection, just I would like to mention something. Somewhere I have read about the metacognition.
Yeah.
Cognition, you know, you have some answer for the planning, language planning or language improvement. For the Karnakaran question asked Karnakaran also, learning to learn or thinking of thinking.
Yeah.
Suppose you have, suppose a child is not able to learn one math, some problem, something like that. If the child asks himself the question, why I am not learning? That is called metacognition.
Yeah.
The learning, questioning the question, the questioning the thinking, everything like that. Learning to learn. You are learning just ordinary learning. You just add 1 + 1, 2, and all these things. Suppose some child is not able to learn that, and we have to find out the reason why I am not reasoning. The teacher can do that, or if the teacher cannot do that, the child, if is very intelligent, or just if you give some stimulation, and if you think why I am not learning, then he can seek some other method, or ask the teacher. Or teacher has to guide him in some other way to learn that process. The metacognition may be helpful in language planning, or the Karnakaran questions. The very good in the teaching and the
True,
process.
true.
Yes,
That
sir.
is exactly where there is a scope of cognitive sciences to
Yes,
come
sir.
into the picture.
Yes, sir. Metacognition helps.
Yeah.
That's I think. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Sharmaji,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your very systematic lecture. I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
Maybe
Please.
you discussed about collective consciousness. Okay, whether this collective consciousness is genetically transferred or socially acquired. if it is genetically transferred, suppose a community, a person living in diasporic context, will he have this kind of collective consciousness? This is one question. Second question is, whenever Panikkar was asking mind and the brain, okay, where does this mind exist? Whether it's in the brain or in the heart. In some languages, the mind is in heart, and some languages it is in brain.
Yeah.
So where is it?
I would first respond to your second question because it requires a small answer. As I pointed out, mind exists as an offshoot of human brain. As simple as that. Mind is realized because of the brain, because of the functioning of the human brain. Okay, so this is the answer to your second question. Now your first question was, can you give me a clue to the first question?
Collective
consciousness
genetically transferred or it's socially acquired?
Yeah, now you see, when it is acquired, cognitive wealth, when it is acquired, it is partly inherited, partly learned. It's the human experience, collective human experience, which results in accumulation, in acquisition of the knowledge. Okay, I'm using it in a wider sense. I'm not using it in a narrow sense of the cognitive processes. I'm saying that whatever is gained because of cognitive processing in the lifespan of a community, of the individual members, all of them contribute to. So what was inherited is there, what has been acquired is there, and it will be passed on. Now how can we look at? Now let us look at the historical studies. If you do, for example, a study of certain movements which took place in history, then you can find out, for example, Bhakti movement, then you can, Sangam literature, then you can look at what was the cognitive wealth available at that time and how was it reflecting into the literature of that time. Okay, so it's acquired as well as passed on to the next generation, because it has been passed on from the previous generation, also inherited, because we learn so many things, you know, in the society. It's a collective wisdom, we can say, collective gain, collective knowledge. And there may be individual responses where we may differ, but we may have a collective response to a particular situation, particular catastrophe, and we may respond to that accordingly. Am I right? Am I able to satisfy you?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. So I'm Ravi Shankar.
Yeah.
One personal question. It's not related to your lecture. As a linguist, at what point of time in your linguistic career you got the interest in picking up the language cognition or language cognition studies? That I would like to know from you, sir.
Yeah. I was a student of psychology from the beginning.
Yes.
In fact, whatever psycholinguistics you see in India, I was the first one to start teaching of psycholinguistics, design the course of psycholinguistics.
Very nice.
And we were also the first person to start a teaching of neurolinguistics, even just when the term neurolinguistics had been coined.
Yes, sir.
Recently at that time. And if you look into, they are all offshoots of, and I have had a background in philosophy.
Yes.
I was a student of logic. I was student of philosophy, the traditions of thinking, Western philosophy as well as Indian philosophy. And I also had training in computer science at a stage when there were no degrees in computer science. You know, I learned programming. You know, we had to make our own programs, and then we did some training together, you know, where who was Rajendran was with me in a program in 1980. Rajendran, you remember? 1980, the first training program in computational linguistics, which we all attended. You know, that was in 1980.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You know, so all this exposure,
Yes.
and then I have had students, you know, branching out. Ramesh is, for example, in cognitive science, and he traveled from neurolinguistics to cognitive science.
Yes.
Then there is someone in forensic linguistics, you know, this is also an extension.
Yes.
And someone is working, one of them is sitting over here. She has done her PhD on acquisition. Professor Arora was here. He did his PhD on in philosophy. I
Yes.
taught philosophy also for some time,
Mhm.
and have supervised some PhD dissertations. So all these have given me a kind of you know, encouragement, one after another, to focus on such issues.
Yeah.
So I am now more interested in reading literature in molecular biology, in evolutionary biology, and neurosciences and cognitive sciences, because there is no division.
Yes.
We all can share, we all can discuss. You know, the day is not far off when you would be learning things from a person engaged in natural language analysis to help doing the analysis of the metaphor.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely.
you. Yeah, I think, sir, your experience will be an eye-opener to the young linguists
Yeah.
who can think of psycholinguistics and philosophy, etc., sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for kind answers, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Pasumban wants to ask questions.
Yeah, please.
Professor Pasumban.
Professor Sarmaji
Yeah,
gave
please.
a very thought-provoking lecture, sir.
Yeah.
My question is regarding the new education policy. Government of India is going to implement new education policy. The government of Tamil Nadu people, we have cognited, or we have a cognition or empowerment in two language formula for the last 4-5 decades. But the government of India is going to implement 3 language formula. There also Sanskrit is also in optional. What the empowerment will affect the Tamil Nadu people? That's my, as a linguist point of view, I want to ask. What will be the empowerment will affect the people of Tamil Nadu? So I want ask this. I want the scientific answer from you, Professor. Thank you, Professor.
See,
sorry to interfere, sir. Sorry to interfere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Professor Dr. Pasumban,
Okay.
and as well as Professor Sharma, I want to request to avoid such kind of political questions at this juncture, because this is not the forum. The topic was not related to new education policy or the 2-language formula, the 3-language formula.
You are right. You are right.
Different session. Through this session for it, and we can discuss that.
I appreciate.
I am sorry to interfere. I am sorry for the interference. Dr. Pasumban, don't be.
Why I am asked, Professor? Why I am asked this question? Because we are
Some other time.
We are not
Maybe.
fanatic regarding the language.
Dr. Pasumban.
That's why I am asked. What is the scientific factor behind it?
Dr. Pasumban.
Okay, I accept Secretary's word.
We will have a separate discussion on this.
We will have a discussion.
Thank you.
We will talk later.
Later, yes.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other question?
I would like to make a comment.
Yeah, please. Welcome.
For thinking, Malayalam speakers like us talk about brain. For thinking, we use brain. For understanding, we talk about mind. Manasilavuga. to be in the mind is to understand. The lexical item for understanding in Malayalam is to be in the mind, manasil agaga. And for thinking, we use brain. This is our distinction.
Yeah,
Lexical distinction.
but as a neurolinguist or as a scientist, I would like to partly modify that both production and comprehension are the activities which are handled by human brain. But what results out of these activities and how it is organized, how it is realized is in the domain of the mind. Therefore, mind is a realization out of the brain.
Yeah. No, I am not here to justify our classification.
No, you are right.
We have a kind of classification like that.
We can say that it is a traditional cognition. Traditional cognition. Traditional cognition. Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah,
I had a question.
Please.
I like to comment on your speech. It is really interesting. I listened to your talk a number of times, especially you are a known person as far as psycholinguistics is concerned. I remember you were working quite a lot while you were doing your PhD, and later on, and I remember that you were working on drama also. I remember that, of course, you have got a lot of tentacles, you cover up a lot of things. Professor, I have got one problem. People could learn many languages. It's not so actually. Okay. I mean, do you think there could be a kind of universal cognition kind of thing? No, I don't know. Like
there is, I don't know, Ramesh may respond to this, but I personally feel there is nothing like universal cognition, because cognition is a kind of response and structuring the information we obtain by virtue of our response and using it further, because we are using our perceptual system, we are using the memory to store the information, and then we use both to take it out and employ it further in future. So cognition is a specific kind of inheritance. It's not universal, but certainly there are some broader questions. For example, some cognitive scientists have argued, and I have a number of papers here, I can mention them, which point out that there are certain things which a child in a language would never learn, would never have the need to cognize. But it does not mean that possibility does not exist. That possibility is there, but the language community has not built, at this stage at least, any need to cognize that. So child would never be having any opportunity to have a linguistic construct of the human experience, and would thus not have anything in the language or in the cognition pertaining to that thing. But given a situation, if the needs arise and if they face, so there is nothing like universal cognition.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My request is to the scholars, to the linguistic researchers, is again to go through Language and Mind by Professor Noam Chomsky.
Yes.
So that you can understand few things with particular reference to cognition, language, and mind. All these are put together, you have to have a language through which you can think further and get something out of it. So you need indirectly, your mind has a language and it encourages you to think. So definitely you can do something by again going through the good work of Noam Chomsky,
Yeah.
Language and Mind, and understand at least
But
some
that
of the
is
concepts.
that is a later development. That's why I said that cognitive sciences grew as a kind. It is also very interesting that cognitive science has not come out of the blue. Cognitive science has come as a critique of some of the ideas of Chomsky.
Right.
1970s is the transition period for its growth, multifarious growth. It does not mean the issues were not handled earlier. Even
Yeah.
Jean Piaget talks of how cognition is acquired and how it is structured, how experience is important. Wundt, the German psychologist who pioneered cognitive psychology, also talks about these things there. But it is since 70s that it came as a response to two of the important issues, and one of them was his theory of innateness, which the hardcore notion of innateness becomes a crucial turning point for cognitive science.
Professor Rangan wants to
Excuse me,
Yeah,
can I-
yeah.
Professor
Yeah,
Rangan.
yeah. Just
Sir,
before
Rangan,
that,
sir.
Professor
Professor
Rangan.
Professor Sharma ji.
Yeah, please.
Are you able to hear?
Yeah,
Hello?
I'm able to-
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
yeah, I hear.
You can proceed.
I cannot see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. It is a well organized and very communicable lecture. I congratulate you first. The thing is, you are talking about the brain, mind, and cognition. One thing is, are they primitive categories, or the one is derived from the other? Because in the beginning you were telling that the mind is a separate one from the. I understood that it is a primitive category, but in the later period you said that it is a realization of the brain. It means it is a derivative category in the sense. Probably I may be wrong also, but doesn't bother. The next one is okay.
Can I point out? Can I respond? See,
Okay.
I pointed out that the biological developments resulting due to course of human evolution have contributed to the emergence, first the emergence of human brain. First was human brain. Second was cognition. Third was mind. But then mind, brain, and cognition went hand in hand. And together, these three, as the systems were already, the biological apparatus was already available, vocal tract had already emerged. So they contributed to, these three contributed to the emergence of the language. After language emerges, then all four becomes the primitive categories. They are there, but mind cannot be shown to exist apart from its realization as a function of the human brain.
Can I add?
This is
please, Ramesh.
only in philosophy I was saying. In philosophy,
yes.
there were debates, there were distinctions, and they were giving more emphasis on the mind first, and brain became well known only around the turn of the later half of the 19th century. And towards the turn of the 20th century, it is brain which is more understood. And then brain gives insights into the nature of the human mind. So they are, they can be autonomous domains. It depends upon your focus. You can have books on philosophy of mind. You can have books on philosophy of brain. And you can also have books on philosophy of brain and mind. Ramesh wanted to say something.
Yeah, I first of all, I thank Professor Sharma for a very elaborate and wonderful lecture.
And Professor Sharma happens to be my PhD supervisor. I mean, virtually I studied with him since my master's. And currently I am the chairman of the Department of Cognitive Science at University of Hyderabad. What I find interesting in some of the questions is that there is a big question mark on the distinction between mind and brain. And that question has been there ever since at least Plato and then Descartes made it very explicit. So I think we have to go back to Descartes in his first Meditations, where he proposes mind as an epistemological concept that is undeniable. Like you cannot deny the existence of mind. And this is one of the strongest rationalist positions that ever since has been going on. And Chomsky particularly resurrected this. If you read Chomsky's little monograph, rationalist, and monograph on rationalist linguistics way back. Coming to my understanding, if you approach it philosophically, brain is ontologically a fact. It is a fact of nature. But mind is an epistemological or conceptual proposal that we have proposed. You can call it pop psychology. Therefore, many people have problem with immateriality of mind because it cannot be demonstrated. Because mental events cannot be demonstrated. You can experience them. Therefore, these two divisions are essential for cognitive scientists, neuroscientists also. But cognitive scientists particularly take mind as real. They don't question the immateriality of mind because they study mental functions or psychological functions. And neuroscientists particularly sometimes have problem with the conceptuality of mind because they deal with the hardware. So we still have among us this mind-brain confusion many times. I think persons now that do not consider duality because this is dualism coming from Descartes. What we are into, there is a branch of philosophy of mind called panpsychism, which is a kind of monism, which believes that consciousness and mental or psychological events exist on their own, irrespective of the material universe. And there is an extreme reductionist view called eliminative materialism, which does not regard mind or psychological functions at all. So we have these two contradictory new positions that emerged 80s onwards. I think in Professor Sharma's lecture, what he was emphasizing was cognitive functions with regard to language playing a key role and their interface. When it comes to brain, these are implemented in the brain. Obviously, he is right in saying that if you look at the brain, there is no way we can demonstrate or understand cognition. Therefore, they kind of are two sides of the coin. That's the best way out. Of course, if you go into the details of the philosophical history of this, we have to then start talking from Descartes, then come to logical positivists, then all the British empiricists, the analytical philosophers, Quine, Chomsky, and Piaget he referred to, then all the way back. So it will be a very long discussion, but I am very happy that some of you have are raising this question that is of interest to me personally. Yeah, that's all I just wanted to add. It is an epistemological concept, but brain is ontologically true. Brain is part of nature, whether we regard it, we disregard it, brain comes and brains go. But the conceptualization of mind that we are talking about now is a moment in history. So it is all that we are referring to is up to us. Tomorrow it might change, but brain is ontologically true, mind is not ontologically true as per one type of philosophy. But as I referred to you, if you go to other philosophical proposals, they become both true. So it depends on which philosophical position you are taking. Thank you very much.
But brain is a biological reality.
Yeah.
Brain
brain can be viewed as a philosophical also, biological also, and
but mind cannot be.
Epistemological also.
Yeah.
But mind cannot be viewed in all those aspects in which
Yeah,
brain
that's
can
true,
be.
that's true.
Dr.
Yes, sir.
எதுவும் question இல்லைன்னா close பண்ணலாம்.
Shanmugam sir?
இல்ல இல்ல
Professor Shanmugam?
Yeah, please.
This is the last question, sir.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yours is not audible, sir.
Yeah, it's
Shanmugam
it's
sir.
audible.
It is
Yeah.
not.
Is it audible now?
Shanmugam sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. You can proceed.
Okay. Sharmaji, you have given a wonderful lecture, and it will actually make the people go for studying mind and language relationship. Okay. Now, I listened to all these things, and you have a problem of mind and brain. Then another thing is collective consciousness. Then all these are problems. And Professor has asked about the problem of teaching, okay, programming, etc. Now, mind, and I was told by some religious people that mind and brain can be distinguished only on the basis of this thing. That is, without any kind of thought, if the mind is, if without any kind of thought and only awareness is there, then there is brain, and no thought in the brain, just like the religious people, there is no thought in the brain, then it is brain. You understand the concept? No thought in the mind means it is brain. If the brain is clubbed with the thoughts, it is mind. So in that way, they make a distinction like that. Okay. Another thing is collective consciousness is a reality, because we have been told that in Hitler's period, there is a collective consciousness of the whole community to eradicate the Jews. And in the American situation, it's a collective consciousness of giving or making the Negroes and the Black people as submissive ones. So that we call as the collective consciousness. It is actually developed and created by the community and society. Okay, that so that's all I want to say. But you have given me some kind of energy to think about this thing. One more question I would like to point out is Chomsky is actually telling that the brain has the faculty to learn the language. Now, my question is, learning the language and acquiring the knowledge, as far as that is concerned, the brain has a faculty, etc. But as you have pointed out, the attitudinal aspects are also coming, attitudinal aspects are there. And the people will be always having this dominating type of tendencies throughout from the history you find. How the child develops this dominating tendency, what you call, it is not the knowledge aspect, but it's the attitudinal aspect. Is there any theory which says when it develops this attitudinal aspects, that is submissive, making other people submissive or dominating the, you find a different type of distinction. For example, male domination is there, then racial domination is there, different types of domination. These are based on attitudes. Whether the child develops the attitudes along with when it develops this language knowledge, or is there any kind of study pertaining to attitudinal? I want to know. Thank you for the lecture. Okay, fine.
Thank you. I think there are very many studies, and in the field of psychology, because these come under the domain of psychology, child psychology particularly. So you can look into the literature or from educational psychology point of view also, they are there. Now, as far as your reference to the religious belief in segregating the mind and the brain on certain rationality is concerned, the neural scientists do not subscribe to that view. They may be interested in the nature of consciousness, but they want to look at how nature of consciousness can be looked in relation to human brain. So brain is the major hardware, major controlling system, but the operating system which you assign there into the hardware is the mind. So emotional content, mood, and facts like that, they fall into that domain.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
There are actually, it is becoming more exciting, and there are a number of other questions also which can be raised and which can be discussed. I'm extremely delighted to find such an august body of audience who have who are so well read to these issues, you know, to these issues which seemingly appear to be related to a highly sophisticated discipline. Because these ideas, when they reflect upon and when they are taken up in such a wider discussion there, they give rise to other interesting studies. So I'm definitely happy and I'm confident that this would definitely lead to more debates and discussions on such issues, bringing the interests of linguists to closer to cognitive scientists and cognitive scientists closer to linguists. I'm once
Professor
again.
Sharma, one last question. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, please.
I just wanted to know, sir, as you said about the reservoirs, cognitive reservoirs in the point 7, could that be helpful to treat Alzheimer's, taking the people back to their communities, or constructing an artificial medium as their community?
See, just today I was reading a report published by psychiatrists from Armed Forces Medical College, Pune, published in Industrial Psychiatry Journal, and I have the reference here I can give you.
Yes.
And there are various studies. In fact, the notion of cognitive reserve has been brought to discussions from the studies of Alzheimer's disease. What the term I used was slightly different. I mentioned not the cognitive reservoir, I used as a metaphorical expression. I used the term cognitive wealth. I was saying that cognitive wealth is the rich acquired collective cognition by a society which is there to respond to any situation, any question as a collective response, as a community response. Therefore, when we look into history, when we look into the nature of a particular problem, nature of, for example, a community feels isolated. So why does a community feels isolated? There is a large number of speakers in that community, and still they don't use their language. They have surrendered. If they have surrendered, it's no pressure from outside, but they have chosen. Why they have chosen? So it's a cognitive issue. It has to be looked into. It has to be examined into. Every time when children belonging to a language community do not come up to the expectations of learning a second language in the school, is not because they fail to do so. It may also be because you are not able to convince how best the language you are putting forth would be able to meet their requirements. So, say question, and thank you all once again. It was a learning experience for me to have so many questions, and still there are many more.
Yes,
and
sir,
I wish I could be there.
We'll be in touch with you, sir.
Yeah.
For further knowledge gaining.
Thank you very much, Professor Sharma ji.
Thank you.
Ravi Shankar sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sharma ji.
Please, sir.
Thank you.
Vijay Rajeshwari.
Yeah.
Sir, vanakkam sir. Sir, sollatumaanga sir.
Open your video.
Yeah.
Yeah, please start.
Okay.
Sollalaamaanga sir, vanakkam.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Respected professors, honorable dignitaries, eminent scholars, our most valued guest, and all the participants. A very good morning, good evening to you all. அனைவருக்கும் இனிய மாலை வணக்கம். It's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of this esteemed organization entitled Tamil Mozhiyil Sangam. I want to express my sincere gratitude to our honorable chief guest, and an erudite scholar in the field of cognitive linguistics in India, Professor R.C. Sharma. He is the former head of the Department of Linguistics, who spared his precious time for us and has delivered a notable lecture on the topic language, cognition, and empowerment. Today we had an opportunity to listen to your lecture, and this will surely be going to encourage the young scholars to pursue their research studies in the field of cognitive linguistics. I extend my heartfelt thanks to our respected Professor Dr. G. Ravishankar, Associate Professor, Faculty of Linguistics, Puducherry Institute of Linguistics and Culture, for presided over the webinar lecture. Next, a warm thanks to our respected Professor K. Karunagaran, President, Tamil Moliyal Sangam, who is a distinguished scholar in linguistics and the former Vice Chancellor of Tamil University. I extend my big thanks for a backbone in all the endeavors of Tamil Moliyal Sangam. Thank you, sir. My special thanks goes to respected Professor Dr. G. Balasubramaniam, Secretary of Tamil Moliyal Sangam, and the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Tamil University for constantly motivating and inspiring us to participate in the webinar series of Tamil Moliyal Sangam and to perform best in the field of language in linguistics. Thank you, sir. Behind every successful program lies the manifold attempts of our committed members. I would like to take a moment to thank all the members of this webinar organizing committee, Dr. L. Ramamurthy, Dr. Kamachi, Dr. Umaraj, Dr. Arulmozhi, Dr. Sundarbalu, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, and Dr. Kumaresan for their immense contribution. I would like to thank all the scholars who involved in the question and discussion session, which made the webinar a great success. I would like to extend my wholehearted gratitude to all the reputed scholars, distinguished faculties, professors, research scholars, students, and my dear friends for your active participation and cooperation, which making this webinar lecture a huge success. Thank you. Nandri.
Nandri.
Thank you, Vijay Rajeshwari.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks
Thank
to
you.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, Professor Sharma, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Ramamurthy.
Now let's depart.